Hello everybody, I'm Visibly Riley, and thanks for joining me in this wrap-up of Phalanx, a one-day event I attended last weekend. I thought we'd, as quickly as I can do, run through the things I liked about the event, the things I thought were kind of and the areas we can improve upon, on top of course, how I think my list did, or my thoughts on the list, and the results themselves. So let's jump right in, and first off, I'm very pleased to have won all of my games, or at least to have done well, right? I did win all my games, but just doing well in the tournament feels good in general, but for Kings of War, it hasn't been really clicking for me. I've been, the factions I want to paint and I'm interested in are very value oriented and, value oriented, and I'm more of a tempo player. And I've just been going to a lot of events where my opponents, I know I played against the TO in an event last August, and I was rocking that game up pretty hard. It was a difficult game, a stupid double one turned the tides against me hard, but I still was winning. And then my opponent just hit with like 7 or 8 out of 9 rockets on a 6+, and then all of those just obliterated my blight. And I'm like, cool, I lose for no reason. And I get that happens. It's just that I don't have enough tournaments of Kings of War or games under my belt to always remember the good times, I guess. And I'm a fairly competitive player in terms of my mindset. So if I'm not winning, I feel like it's a personal failure. So anyway, it always feels nice to at least have one good point to look at. Next up, I got to play against 3 people at least 2 people that I've wanted to play for a while, but haven't been able to. And then I got to have one very nice rematch at the end there. So my first round opponent, I've seen her army a bunch of times. I think she's been at most of the events I've been to, or at least the ones in the past year. And it's always nice to see her army. I think it's gorgeous, but I haven't had the opportunity to play against it yet. So that was really nice. My round 2 opponent I've known since the Warhammer days, and we've been to umpteen tournaments with each other and, games days and playing at people's houses, but we've actually never played. So it was really nice to get that done. And then, of course, my round 3 opponent, it was a pleasant surprise to figure out that we had played several years ago and also done a mirror match then. So that was fun. And as for that, I also got to all 3 of these armies. I really enjoyed the painting on, and it's not to say that I think that they're the best painted armies, or that they really drove me to raise my hobby. But they all did different things, and I like to see a gamut of things at a table. I like to see highly competitive players. I like to see painters, and I like to see everything in between. So round 1, I got to play against a beautiful, as you've seen, a beautiful dwarf army, and that's one of those armies where the person brings it to every event, and that's their army. So really cool to see stuff like that. That's just a total passion project where you go, I like dwarves, these are my dwarves, right? While my round 2 opponent had also a very gorgeous army, in fact, the one I voted for best painted. But it's a different take on it, where this guy just shows up with all sorts of stuff, just whatever floats his boat at the time. He's painted it up and put it on the table, so that's always cool. And then the round 3 opponent, it just felt kind of like a mirror for me. Both of us just had, not only was it a mirror match in very similar armies, but both of us had like half finished Empire of Dust armies. So yeah, I like seeing all that sort of stuff, and that echoed through the tournament itself when we had people from the various groups that I play in. I play in 2 actually distinct groups of Kings of War players because no one gets along. But one of them is down south about an hour from where I live, but it's closer to where I work. And one of those players, I gave a demo maybe a couple months ago too. I'm not exactly sure when, but now he has a fully painted elf army. So that's always cool to see. It's like, wow, you really like the game. But and then I had another guy from another group, and both of these people brought friends themselves, which I'll talk about in a second. But this other guy showed up with a full plastic, just gray plastic army, and I also like to see that, right? I don't want to see it all the time, and I don't want to see it when I travel too much. But for local events, I am 100% behind showing up with your gray plastic, because playing a game is better than not, right? So yeah, I don't particularly want to see gray plastic, but I want to see that more than I want you gone. So always cool. I like to see that mixture, and I hope that inspired them to push themselves even more, right? So it's really cool, and it definitely inspired me. Then next up, I saw. Let's talk about the fact that it was a one-day event was interesting. When it was announced, I was pretty wary of it. I was definitely going to go because I don't have anything else to do this month in terms of gaming. So, and it's always nice to have a set date for a tournament to get projects rolling. I like to have deadlines. So, yeah, but having a one day was interesting to me in the beginning because only having one day makes it so it's super spiky, right? We decided that this one day counts the same as a 2-day, provided that we got the number of players in there. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know, because it seems like if you won it, then you just got you got extra points for no real reason. But I came to, and I'm not saying that one days are bad, I'm just saying that one of them is bad. Because if you have a bunch of them, right, that the aggregate's fine, but we only have the one, so it just ends up being an outlier. But having this one day really showed me I think I was wrong on that, because it's not maybe not wrong, but I was definitely being self-centered, right? I was thinking about my personal experience in the tournament, or what I thought was important, versus the idea of growth, right? So I was looking at a sustain model of what is it for the existing players, when really we're so small that we should be looking at growth almost always, right? So having at least one of these one days, I've never seen so many new players in a tournament, or at least not since I first showed up at a Kings of War event. And even then I knew most of the people there because of Warhammer. So yeah, it was really nice to see all these new faces, or at least new faces to the competitive scene, show up and play games. So maybe having a one day was great for that. Also, there were several players that, I mean, work life is, I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but it's not getting better out here. So these people, we're working 6 to 7 days a week, and out here, and there are people working 70 to 90 hour weeks, which is absolutely insane. And yeah, so it's nice to have a one day where you go, I physically cannot go to a 2-day tournament because I have to go home, right? I have to sleep because I go to work again at 2 a.m. So yeah, I came around on that one day idea. I think it was a great idea to have one or two of these thrown into our schedule. Next up, let's talk about right? So the things that weren't game breaking, but I wasn't a fan of. And first off, let's talk about the location. And that might sound bad, but Olympic Cards and Games and Lacey Washington, or Gabby's Cards and Games, I'm not sure exactly what the official title is. It's a great store. The staff are super friendly. They're not pushy, but they're very friendly. Gabby herself is very friendly. And it's a large area. It's one of the largest game stores in the US. It's pretty cool due to that, and it has all the things that I would want. So I haven't bought a Games Workshop rush in my life, I think. Actually, now that I think about it, they're just, in case you were wondering, they're not worth it, guys. Just do your research, buy better brushes. And they have real brushes there, so that was really cool. They have various paints, just whatever you're into, pigments, and not just pigments from Vallejo, but also Secret Weapon, anything that my little gamer heart wanted, I could probably get there. So that was really nice. But there are some small issues, the chief among them being that Washington, so despite what our president might be saying, global climate shift is a real thing. And Washington is getting warmer, and unfortunately, our buildings aren't built with AC in mind, because Washington has always been a very temperate area, right? It doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold, and cold is more than the heat. It's never too hot here. But in this store, it was blistering, and it's mostly because it's been a little warm for the past couple of days, and this store has no AC and is in fact built specifically to keep heat in. And we were right near the ceiling, and it was just, oof, it was a roaster. So I know other people were fine with where they were. Maybe I was just off in the corner. Maybe I was having a little a little reaction. But yeah, I was very uncomfortable with how hot it was. But other than that, the only other quibble I have is that the store has a no swearing policy, which I observed, but I don't particularly respect. I think that I get the idea that if you're gonna say no swearing, right? Like, I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. You're out in public, you're gonna hear things like this, and rules like this are never to help children, they're to help parents. So I'm just not a fan. I don't believe in that. I think it's asinine. But I do at least observe when people tell me not to in their store or their house or whatever, because I don't want to be, I'm not going to be an asshole about it. But yeah, I don't particularly like it, and it doesn't make it so I wouldn't go down to the store for tournaments, nor would I not support it. I think it's a great place if you're into that sort of thing, but it would never be like my store, right? It'd never be like my regular hangout place. I'd go somewhere else. But anyway, besides that, the other sort of meh idea was sportsmanship. So this tournament did have sportsmanship scores. They were pretty simple, so they weren't super involved. But I'm still very wary of sportsmanship. I like sportsmanship scores that are based on small things like did you show up with your army, right? Was it can I tell what the models were, right? Did you have an army list for your opponent? Do you have your dice, tape measure, all that stuff ready? Are you ready to go? Were you not late, right? All those sort of things. Sure, that can be called sportsmanship, and it should be graded, right? It's just small courtesies, right? Just don't make the tournament run late, and don't wreck your opponents. Like, don't mess with the stees just because you're disorganized. Get your shit together, get it in a shit museum. I don't care. Just get it together. So yeah, I like rules like that, and this tournament did actually have most of those, with the only exception being that there was a piece on it that said, did your opponent allow you to do takebacks or something to that rhythm, and I don't like that. As you might have noticed in my battle reports, I do allow my opponent to do takebacks. I like to talk to my opponents when they're making huge mistakes that I notice, right? Like, especially if they're newer. And of course, I'll ask you if you want me to help you or not. I also don't want unsolicited help. I know it would make me mad. And if I'm already tilted in the game and you're like, oh, you can only make these 3 things, what do you want to do? I'm probably going to say, I concede and go fuck yourself. But so it is important to ask first. But I do believe in that idea of sportsmanship, helping your opponent along, because at the end of the day, this is a game and I don't care that much. But I don't think that should be mandatory. I think that people play in different ways, and I think that they're perfectly courteous. If you begin the game and you go, listen, man, we're not doing any takebacks. The rulebook doesn't say that we're doing takebacks, so we're not doing them. I'm going to go, all right, let's do it. And I also don't have anything against the TO saying that as a rule. The TO going, there are takebacks in this tournament, and it's actually part of your sportsmanship. That is what a TO is for. A TO is there to not just run the event, but to start the kind of event that they want to play in, to incentivize the kind of play they want to see. So this person wanted to see more people allowing for takebacks, and that is their prerogative. That's absolutely fine. It's just not something that I particularly like. But again, that's why it's in the meh category. It did not influence my enjoyment at all. It's just, something to think about. Now, the only improvement I can think of for this event is the painting rubric, and that is, so the painting rubric we use up here in the Pacific Northwest, in case you're not aware, was made for Warhammer tournaments back in 8th edition, and in fact, I helped write it. So yeah, I'm very intimately aware of what it says and where and how, right? It has been changed for King's War. I know that people like Tom Millard have looked at it. I think Ryan Munsel's looked at it and added some small adjustments. But I look at that and I kind of go, I think this thing needs to be retrofitted, right? Like, it worked for what it was, but everything can be improved. Everything and everyone can be improved upon. So I look at that and I go, there are things like, there are 3 points for display board. And I purposefully game that, which were 2 of the points you could get by having a display board that didn't even match your army. So 1 point for flock, 1 point for having some scenery elements on it, and then 1 point for matching your army. So I just brought one of my display boards. I didn't have time to make one for the army because I got pretty sick right before this event. But anyway, I want to get rid of stuff like that, and not just because I want to close loopholes, but also because display boards, while I'm all for them influencing player's choice, which is more of the, pick the army that you want to go home with, as Rob Fanoff would say. So yeah, put out your display board, put your best foot forward, but it really does hinder people who travel, right? Like I used to travel with this guy, gorgeous Night Goblin army, an enormous display board, and he would have to crate it up and ship it. Right, that is a commitment to the display board, right? To try to win that best painted award, because that's what he spent a long time on that army, and he really wanted to put his best foot forward. That's absolutely fine. That's on him. But I do think that we need to take a look at display boards, just because it really does influence our psychology when we're looking at armies and trying to figure out what's best painted, right? I know that I've recently seen people go absolutely gaga over armies where there's one model in there that's painted exceptionally, but the rest of the army is painted all right at best. And the display board is the same thing, where there's one element that's excellent and the rest is sort of but it's you just dangle your keys over here and go, ooh, shiny, and people see it and they go, I want to vote for that model regardless of what army is in. And I'd like to curtail that a little bit. It's our natural our natural thought. We don't do too much critical thinking, or some people do want to just go, I don't care about the army, I care about that one model, it's so good, I don't care about anyone else's complete project. So there are a bunch of things in the painting rubric about that, and I think that if we had them as optional points, which would mean that we'd have to, so let's talk about the way that we do it. Is each thing will have the rubric has things like try freehand. Doesn't matter how good you are. This is not a meritocracy. This is just do it. Just try, right? You don't need to be good. You could get out your ballpoint pen and just write, I suck at painting, onto your painted banner. That's freehand, right? So that would be one instance of it. And so we have, it's up to 3 points, I want to say, and all the things are like that. Or they're like, did you remove all the mold lines? And then did you, blah, 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 blah. And it makes it so the best painted, the top echelon is more, it's closer together. So like number 1 and number 10, out of, let's say it's out of 40 points, I think it is, might only be about 6 points away from each other, right? It's just not that big of a gap, but it's because we make, small point. It doesn't really matter if you're ahead by 20 or you're ahead by 6, especially because best overall is so heavily battle focused. But anyway, we have stuff like that, and then we also have a judge come by and judge your army afterwards. One, to make sure that you were honest. So if you have your freehand, or to make sure you understood the rubric. I've never seen someone cheat, right, to put in points that they didn't bring, but I have seen people it's very common that people will be too caught up on the word use and not give themselves points that the rubric is supposed to give you. So yeah, just be lenient on yourself. The judge will come by and really rail you if you want to lose points there. And then you take an aggregate of them. So what I'm proposing is that we have more points on the rubric than you can actually score. And then to make best painted be a thing again, we will go back through with more stringent paint judging, going through your army, making sure that everything, all the I's are dotted, everything like that. And then again, use the aggregate, and if that doesn't give us a clear winner, then the judge themselves will go through and judge them. Partly because I don't think player's choice should be influencing best painted. Player's choice is a crapshoot. It's very subjective. Best painted doesn't have to be. Best painted can be based off a rubric and very simple. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I think that I might take a look at the painting rubric and fiddle around with it a little bit to see if I can get that to work out. But yeah, that's my only improvement on the event. Otherwise, I thought it was great. Now for my list, It was interesting. I think that it definitely performed well. It did the things I wanted it to do, but it was what's in it is predicated by what I have painted. So I knew I had painted these mummies, and I knew I wanted them in the list, which means I was running the mummy formation, which means that I have 40 mummies, not 20. So I had them. I knew I wanted to run a soul snare. Because I remember playing the beta soul snare, and then everyone was like, the casket of souls couldn't move, why can the soul snare move? And then they gave it reload and made it unusable, and now they made the soul snare amazing, one of the best units in the game. So I knew I wanted it in there. And then everything else sort of just fell together. I have, X painted Revenants. So I was like, well, I could run a Revenant Horde to fill up points. Generally, I run 2 hordes of skeleton warriors, but I only have 1 horde painted and then a horde of skeleton archers, right? So I didn't want to do that. I had enough chariots. I knew I wanted to have those regiment of chariots in the army because I like how they're painted. And, everything just sort of falls into place. As for its performance, I think it did fairly well. I will start tooling it again because I have the Enslaved Guardian models, both archers and normal, to run them, and their buffs have made them both of those are excellent units. So I might try to retool the list a little bit to have them, since I want to. There's another event I want to say in June, so next month, where I want this army to be even better painted, closer to finished, if not finished. Probably won't be finished, but I want it to be closer to finished, just for my own sanity. So yeah, those are my ideas. Most of it is hobby related. As for performance, I think it did just fine. I mean, if you're not going to run, you don't have to run the Mummy's Revenge. I mean, a lot of people say that, it's so good, it's an auto-include. No, it's not. The Elohi one is, but this one isn't. The Mummy's Revenge is a very good formation, but you could replace it with something, like you could run a bunch of the Bone Giants and Bone Dragons, have a completely different army, that the mummies don't really fit into because their regiments don't give you enough unlocks. Empire of Dust is not a cheap army. It has, cheap skeletons and then expensive everything else. So yeah, you need the characters because you're playing undead, and we don't get 70-point necromancers or whatever necros costs. We get expensive curse high priests because they're worth it. So anyway, that is my thoughts on the list. Let's get into the results themselves. There was an award for best or player's choice, which is everyone voted on their favorite army, and then we had best sportsman, which was that was the way I like best sportsman to be done. It had nothing to do with the sportsmanship rubric, as far as I know. It had everything to do with voting for your favorite opponent, right? So it really should be called favorite opponent. And again, another thing on the voting on that, guys, don't have a 2-day event and then vote for your favorite opponent at the end of day 2. Recency bias will set in, and I can tell you right now, if you go through those votes, you're going to see people voting for their day 2 opponents way more often than their day 1 opponents. We just don't remember it. It's human nature. So if you're going to have that favorite opponent vote, have it at the end of each day, right? And then figure out how you're going to get your points out there. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, we had a favorite opponent, a player's choice for army, a best painted, a best general, and a best overall. So the player's choice army went to Tony Zamunda with his very pretty Trident Realm. If you guys are aware of or were at Masters, you can see it in the Pacific Northwest team. It's very orange. It's always cool. He's always adding stuff to it. This time he brought these 2 octopuses for Kraken models, and they were a joy. They're enormous, and I think he played with the scale very well. Next up, we had Best Sportsman, which went to On Lee, I think On's last name is Lee, who is a player that I gave him his first demo game of Kings of War. He's a pleasure to play against. He's the guy that painted up his elf army just as fast as possible, and it is cool looking. I'm really into it, and I'm glad that he did well here. Then we had Best Painted, which went to Zach Davidson, who was my round 2 opponent, the Lycan Horde guy. I love that army. As I said before, I voted it as my favorite army. So really cool. I'm into it. Best general went to me by just barely. I think I won by 3 or 4 points total. So or maybe 2 points. I don't know. The people under me, I think we had a 53 and maybe a 51. So I won by a little bit, but that's what you're going to get in a 3-round event, unless someone just like really runs away with it. And then best overall went to Ryan Munsell and his herd. So that's always really cool. I got second place for best overall, and I'm really happy with that, actually. Best overall is the prize that matters to me. I don't care about best general. And not to say that, like, you know, I'm not honored to win it, or I'm not aiming for it, right? Actually, it is to say I'm not aiming for it. If I get it, that's great. I'm not aiming for it. Same thing with best painted. I like to have an aggregate. I like to play hard and I like to paint hard, right? And I like to be acknowledged for both of them. So that's what best overall does. And it was really nice to get second place. Again, battle carries most of that score up, but also because my army is not there yet, right? I have finished 1 unit total. Everything else needs to, well, the characters, I guess, could be called finished. I probably won't do anything with them, but I at least need to work on my basing on some of these guys, because I based them 5 or 6 years ago now, and I don't particularly like it. And then the vast majority of the army just needs to be updated, right? I need to finish painting it. It's just base coated, or it's painted in the old scheme. So I'm very pleased to have received second place, but even more pleased to have not received first. So I have somewhere to go. And yeah, so that's it for the event. I'd like to thank all of my opponents. I won't say their names because I don't know if they want me to, but all of them were lovely, great games. And I'd like to thank Dustin Church for running this event. He's really stepped up in terms of caring about this community, and specifically the Pacific Northwest, because man, we are lazy. So really nice to have more people like him. Great event. And again, thanks to Olympic Cards and Games. Great store if you like not swearing. Really cool area. And the price support. Oh, that's another thing, the price support. I really like the idea that Dustin came up with. Again, it was a 1-day event, so it's closer to a like a games day, right? It's not super serious, and it attracts new players. So the prize support was basically, it was a $20 buy-in for the event, and then you got prizes for the awards I just told you about, but then all the rest of the prize support went into random gift cards, which were all door prizes. So that's really cool for for a player, for an event trying to attract new players, right? Just give everything away as door prizes. You know, everyone else gets their prestige if they do well, but you know, even if you show up with gray plastic and lose every game, you could still walk out with money. So really cool, well thought out. So anyway, thank you for listening, and until next time, bye.